In this episode of the podcast, I spoke to my good friend and fellow/rival podcaster, Patrick Armstrong. He always says we should do more podcasts together, and I think this conversation we had here really shows why. Patrick runs the local podcast called Conversation Piece, which contains even more local Indianapolis stories than you'll find here in my feed, and he is 1/3 of the John Cheese Show, a podcast about Asian adoptees. Both of these shows are worth your time to seek out, the latter especially if you enjoy what you heard from Patrick in our piece of conversation today. If you enjoy the show today and you want to support me directly, you can do so by going to support.thirdspaceindy.com. Every bit helps keep this project sustainable. Alternatively, you can help by leaving a review on your preferred podcast platform or by liking and subscribing on YouTube. Either way, I love you still, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Patrick.
Scared rabbit, they've got you boxed in. Old habit, you draw the curtain. Lonely only if they ever leave.
Hello.
Do you feel free?
Dude, this guy's already laughing. Hello, my name is Michael Zarek, and this is Third Space Indy. In 1989, a man named Ray Oldenburg wrote a book called The Great Good Place. And in this book, he coined the term the third place. This describes somewhere outside of your home and outside of your work that you can go, be with others, exist, and be yourself. Today, I've been saved by a dear friend of mine, Patrick Armstrong, who's sitting down with me at the Cottage Home
Community space.
It's a small park.
A micro park? Would you call it a micro park? I heard that term today.
This is like a normal sized park.
Do you think this is a normal size park?
I don't know. It kind of feels like it.
Well, there's no like playground equipment, so I
Every
feel
park
like
has a playground equipment.
that's true. That's a good point.
So yeah, you heeded my call on Instagram. Within 12 minutes, I said I need a guest, and you said please have me on.
I
And
said
so
me. Let's not muddy
He
the
begged,
truth.
he pleaded, and here we are in Cottage Home, the neighborhood that you live in, reside in.
I do live just across the street, I guess I should say.
You've been on the podcast before,
I have.
which we were talking about. You're technically the second repeat guest. Shout out to Anderson, York. But yeah, what's going on today? What are you doing?
Today I had to walk around and do content for Downtown Indy because that's where I work, and I feel like I still probably need to do some more of that to get this video done that I need to do tonight. But other than that,
You're like, oh, small break.
no.
I'm gonna take a break from my content to make content.
I thought that I was done, and when you posted that story, so the reason, and then I said me, and then I sent the video, and they were like, and I was like, ugh. So that's it. I think I'm good, but I could always get more.
You've triggered a thought which I was thinking about earlier. I was like, what am I going to talk to Patrick about? Which is that when we talked almost a year ago now. Is that true?
Was that a year ago?
No, it's probably 8 months. I feel like it was late. It was cold.
It was cold. I was
Yeah.
wearing sweatpants.
Yeah. Since we last talked on the podcast, first of all, you run your own podcast called Conversation Piece, and you've now moved to doing that once a month, basically, rather than sort of sporadically live, once a month live.
Yep.
From sporadically live. And then you've also picked up a job with Downtown Indiana.
Downtown Indianapolis.
Downtown.
Actually, technically Downtown
Please.
Indy Alliance.
Oh, I thought they changed the name.
Well, it was Downtown Indy Inc. Until January of this year.
Okay, this
or
is where
December, I guess.
I always get confused. I can't remember which one's the new one. I make it up. Anyways, the question I have about this is that how has your... So you asked me a question recently about reaching out to Bike Party to give them an award.
Right.
Are you allowed to share that?
When's this coming out?
No, Monday.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. And I was thinking about like what that implication there is that like you're reaching out to a liaison to reach out to Bike Party. Do you find that it has changed the way you interact with the community now that you have a more full-time job?
Oh, that's interesting. I've actually not thought about that before. I think in this specific instance, I think I know a few people who have attended Bike Party fairly regularly, and I have not done so myself. And so in my mind, because of the urgent quote unquote urgency, I guess, of the matter, it felt more expedient to reach out to a person I knew who I know knows people within that ecosystem versus reaching out directly. However, I am prepared to reach out directly should the need arise.
Yeah.
But like, I like to, so that's this specific instance. I don't know necessarily that working at Downtown Indy has changed the way that I interface with community. I think it's what's been most impacted is the frequency, because before, and you probably can relate to this, but when I say, and I always use the quotes, an entrepreneur, which is, I should remove the quotes because I technically am and was doing that. But like when I didn't have a full-time job, all my full-time job was community. So like it was just going to a place, going to a coffee shop, going to the bookstore, finding an event that was happening during the day and being there and chatting with people. And I feel like I, especially since January, have not done that really almost at all, or definitely not at the frequency that I would like to. Part of that's the job. Part of that is being a parent and having a kid that's 2 now and has a lot more things going on that I want to be involved with. And part of it is like just personally trying to take better care of myself from like a mental and physical health perspective. And I do think that being in community and connecting with community more, it helps with that. But I just feel like I haven't had the bandwidth to do so, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess the extension of that question is like, if you were to think about I feel like you're pretty blessed with a job that's semi-flexible in terms of.
Yeah. I don't think anybody from the office watches this or listens to this currently. So I feel okay in saying that I left work to come and do this podcast.
Yeah. But like, definitely more flexible than like a typical like blue collar 9-to-5 job.
100%.
Do you feel, if you extrapolate your own experience to potentially someone else, feel a little empathy in this moment? Like, do you think like you could see the problems of our society in your own experience through this lens? Does that make sense?
So like
the inability or the lack of community we feel in the modern day.
Yes.
From going to being able to attend everything under the sun to now lessened, even though you have a flexible schedule, to the potential of having like a full 9-to-5 job.
100%. I think that working or stepping back into full-time work in like the blue collar sense is definitely eye-opening, or it raises my level of awareness of just how little time there is to do community or just do what you want to do. Like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be community, but like to chase your passion, to pursue your dream. Like, if you are working a full-time job, and then you have a family on top of that, or you have to work, and you maybe have to work a second job, or you're going to school. Like, there are a lot of extra things that add into or onto the full-time role that makes it damn near impossible unless that job fulfills whatever dream or passion you're chasing. Yeah.
You've had a couple people on your podcast that are actively doing that too. That's the crazy thing.
What do you mean?
Is it Bryson Davis Johnson?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Somebody who has a full-time, like, he's a principal at a school, but also runs like community health events. Like, that's crazy.
That's the thing. And so like, I feel like it's really difficult. Actually, I don't know that it is. I feel like in my personal experience, it has been difficult, for me personally, it's been difficult to find ways to do work, do the podcast or whatever else that I'm trying to do, creative work just in general, and then do family stuff, and then actually figure out the right way. And maybe there is no right way, but the way that works for us to marry those three things together. So to like maximize the amount of time that I'm able to spend doing what I want to do with the people that I want to do it with. And I feel like somebody like Bryson, I really respect, because he has put his whole self into, I think, both of these things. And he might not say that maybe about being an educator or administrator of school, but like, I don't know that you can do something like that and not be fully committed. And then on the flip side, go every weekend for sure, but maybe almost every night to an event or lead your own event that is strictly or truly, at least from my perspective, truly about building a community. And we can maybe get into the weeds about like, because there's a cost associated is like truly building community. But I think his events and like what he does is not just you pay me and then you come to a thing. It's like you pay me and I'm also there interfacing with you, interacting with all the people, figuring out ways to connect other people that are attending the event. Like, I think that to me is true community building, like, and is a true community event, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I feel like, well, you brought this up before we started recording, but like the difference between like what is community building and networking or
Right.
something similar to that. I don't think that just because an event is free that it means it's a community event necessarily.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree. I think
There's a lot of free community events in Indianapolis that have a cost associated with it anyways.
Well, I think I think the difference isn't necessarily in the cost. I think it is what's happening at the event that is labeled community or
Mhm.
being about community or building community. And I feel like this is just a discourse that's been occurring on my feeds lately, but I'm assuming has been happening for a while, is that a lot of events now I feel like are labeled community events. But the criticism maybe, or the question that's being asked is like, what's happening at the event that says community or fosters the ability to create community?
Yeah.
And so
who are you serving basically?
yeah, and I've really had to think about that from the podcast perspective, like doing the live show, is that am I connecting with not just the guest who's coming on to the show, but the guests that are coming to experience the show? Am I creating opportunities for them to connect with each other? Am I creating opportunities for them to connect with people that they don't know at the event?
Mhm.
Are they able to connect with me? Am I accessible?
Yeah.
And I feel like I've really been trying to take that to heart, thinking about how I navigate and move through the live shows, because I think after this last one with Mr. Kinetic, I felt like after the show, I was so focused on like cleaning stuff up and just trying to like help draft, like reset, that I didn't really connect with a lot of people after. And this is another reason I like Bryson so much, and I believe he's like a true community builder, because when he came on the show in February, he literally talked to every single person
Dude,
that
guy
came
was
to the show,
so nice.
to the point that
It was
one of the
crazy.
people who asked a question, shout out LaDonna, she prefaced by saying, when you spoke to me, I felt like you were really listening and engaged with me. Like you were looking at me in my eye, like, and it was like, it felt like you were there to talk to me, not necessarily be a guest on a podcast. And I'm like, I don't know that I've always been the best at doing that. And I will use the excuse of being like, I'm truly like an introvert, like trying to do this content today, walking around on the street. I'm like, man, I don't think I'm doing a good job of this. And I'm
You're doing it
nervous.
on the street
Yeah,
stuff.
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was nervous. And I feel like I'm trying to like get over that, because I have used the word community a lot when it comes to describing the live show, even probably talk about the podcast in general. But is it actually that? And I think like what you do with Third Space Indy and just you in general, you do that. And I think I've told you this many times, but like I really respect the way that you went about building this platform, doing the things that you do, creating the content that you create, because you really are about all of that stuff in a way that I think that very few people are, not just in Indy, just in general.
Oh, that's very kind of you. You tell me this every time we're together, so
Yeah.
I'm
Well, I
always-
mean-
I try not to be dismissive.
You can dismiss it if you want. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Like, there's so many events around town. They're like, this is a community event, but really, it's just like a small market.
Sure.
Not to like call anyone specific out, but it's like, oh, come to our community event and spend money with the businesses that are here. There's no like interpersonal engagement. There's no
Exactly.
call to action for some other cause or anything like that. It's sort of just like, how do we get people out to spend money with these businesses that are involved with us, versus like, how do you create an ecosystem of people that actually give a fuck about each other?
Right. Well, that's the reason that people are going to show back up to events, like, is because they care not just about the person that's putting on the event, the organizer, but the people that are going to be in that space with them. I totally agree. I feel like and as speaking as somebody who just organized a small vendor market, like, it is, I think it's really prevalent in this city that the event itself is supposed to be the catch, like, it's supposed to be like the end all be all for all the things, like, and it's kind of on the event goer, the event attendee, to do the heavy lifting of meeting somebody new, connect, like purchasing a thing because it's under the guise of like supporting local business, which it's not necessarily guys, it is doing that, but
which
like,
is not a bad thing. It's not even like to dismiss this idea.
Totally. I mean, because we need to do that, but like, if you as the organizer and like don't have really a specific reason to not be interacting and immersed and engaged in the event itself, which requires, when I say all those things, I'm saying that is you connecting with the people at the event. Like, I feel like it loses a bit of the substance of community, and it becomes more of like a label that's just a label, and it's not actually doing what community is supposed to do.
How do you compare your podcast and maybe the small Asian market? Also, shout out to your market and also Mike's with Tarot Fest. I think those two especially are like, I just want to do this because I want to show people that there's Asians in Indianapolis, or there's Filipinos in Indianapolis.
Totally.
Like that, it's like a sort of exposure thing, but like for yourself in a lot of ways. And you're like, oh my God, there's other people like me around. But how do you compare like those two things to like what you do with the Asian, is it Asian professionals? What's the where you went to the restaurant this past like?
So that's Asianapolis. So that's like the market. That's part of the market, I would say. Well, because the one that we had in June was the first official event of Asianapolis. I would say. So I would separate the podcast completely from those two things.
Sure.
So like the podcast, I feel like is super intimate in a way that I guess community building doesn't have to be more than two people, because being like you were just talking about, like being engaged with somebody and building community is about how do I want to like give a fuck about the person that you're building community with. And I feel like, I hope that the podcast is something like that. And I hope that I actually know that there are people that I have not continued to connect with after having them on the show that I probably should still be connecting with, and I will 100% take accountability for that. For the so Asianapolis was only meant to be a very low lift entryway into finding community. Maybe not necessarily building community, but finding a community of people who look and maybe don't look, but people finding a similar community from the diaspora that you are from, and in the local like geographical location that you find yourself in. And as that has grown over the last 2 years, in our Instagram chat from being 5 people to now nearing 200, maybe more, we decided to, in addition to the monthly dinners that we do, host an event, and we called it a meetup. I would probably call it a gathering. I would even probably call it a market before I called it a meetup. But we went through the democratic process, and meetup was the name that we landed on, and I'm totally okay with
Semantics.
that. Yes, because a lot of people did meet up there. But I would say the difference when comparing those two events, the dinners that we host every month at a different restaurant, mind you, and this meetup, is that the meetup is like, the meetup was a way to bring as many people as possible, no matter if you were Asian or not, into a space where Asian and Asian American culture was being amplified. So that was through games, that was through arts and crafts, that was through the vendor market that we had going on. And that was like very high level, like, this is what we want. Like, we just want to show off the community and and some of what is available here in Indianapolis. The dinners are very specifically for Asian and Asian Americans who are part of our group, or maybe not, but like find out about it, to come and gather in an even more intimate setting, and kind of to the ethos of how the group started, be very low lift, no agenda, no programming, just come and meet other people who are part of this diaspora and share a meal. And then if you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't have to. You can eat and leave. But if you want to stick around and chat and meet new people, you can definitely do that too. And I say that would be the biggest difference, is one is very much operating on a macro scale, and one is operating much more micro-ly. Micro-y? That's how I would describe the difference.
You said something at the end there that I have been thinking about also, about how like someone can just show up and sit and not talk to anyone and then leave. I think that is also community building in its own way. There, are you familiar with the creator John on Instagram?
Maybe.
No, he's like an
Sounds familiar,
urbanist.
bud. Okay.
He makes a lot of reels or like shorts or whatever. But he talks about how like, and this will sort of transition into the next topic also that I have in mind, but talks about how like when you have a real thriving city where there's a ton of people, introverts can also thrive because they just like sit there and be anonymous, but also still get the socialization that they want. Like, and if they choose to, they can interact with someone, but they're like, if you're an introvert walking down the streets of New York City, no one will bother you, but you'll still get that sense of like humanity.
Yeah.
And there's something to that, I think.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that, so one of the pieces of feedback I got from this last dinner was, could we do like icebreakers or have something available on the tables to like get people to be able to interact with each other, and then especially people, and maybe like a randomized seating chart, so that way people were sitting next to people they didn't know, because they felt like people kind of gathered with folks that they knew already. I will say, I like those ideas. I will say that this was the first dinner post the meetup, and we had 41 people, which is the most I think we've had at any dinner. I think we've topped out at
That
20
photo you
prior.
had, there was a lot of people there.
And so I do feel like there was something to the fact that this was kind of like the first reset dinner, and so people were naturally going to find each other that they knew. There were also people that were bouncing around, going to table, talking to everybody and meeting them, and those, I will say that those were the folks who had the ideas of like, can we do icebreakers and whatnot. However, I say all of that to say that there were two people I remember specifically who I didn't see really interact with many other people. They were just there, and they ate, and I saw them get up, take their tray back, and then say thank you and leave. And I appreciate what you said and you bringing this up, because I feel like at the end of the day, Asianapolis specifically for me means that anybody who is Asian or Asian American and lives in Indianapolis can come and be a part of it. You, at whatever level of like comfortability or like ability or whatever it is that you are, whoever you are, mixed race, I don't give a fuck. Like, you are welcome at our tables. And I would have a huge problem if anybody was trying to like force somebody who wasn't ready to enter into a social interaction that way to do so, because I do think that there is power in just allowing people to be at a thing and stand in the corner and observe or do whatever they want to do on their own. And they just should not be forced. No one should be forced into having to interact in a way that maybe they're not ready for or not comfortable with. And I would like to think that we are fostering that space with Asianapolis, specifically for the Asian and Asian American community in the city, in a way that other organizations that I've attended events for, and I love those organizations, do not do. And I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to start this group to begin with, was because we needed something different that was going to have a more wide open doors than some of these other places that I've interacted with.
Good answer. I don't know. Whatever. Great answer.
I mean, you can rebut if you have some pushback.
No, I have no pushback.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's a good answer. I don't know. You recently went to 2 places. You went to Spain
Yes.
and you went to Michigan.
Yes.
On the topic of like community building, can you tell me about, not beyond having your child with you and not, like what are some things you observed in terms of as a vacation spot, as a third party, like what you observed about these 2 different places you visited?
As it relates to community or just in general?
I don't know, vibes based, whatever you have in mind.
Yeah. So we went to Spain. It was just Emily and I, my wife and I, and we went to Barcelona, and we were exclusively in Barcelona. And I think the biggest takeaway that I had from being there was that we were there during the week. So like the work week, people were moving, grooving, going about their business, but nobody was in a hurry to get to wherever it was they were going. And I feel like this is, I think, maybe fairly common in Europe, but I felt like it was really noticeable in Barcelona because there were a lot of cars, but a lot of people were walking, a lot of people were biking, a lot of people on public transit. And it didn't feel like people were like pushing, like to get to wherever it was they needed to go. And that kind of intentional slowness is kind of how I described it to myself, was something I was really like struck by, because 1, Barcelona is very pedestrian friendly, but 2, like I think it makes sense for it to be that way because people aren't moving at a pace where they're going to run over a bunch of people or like get upset that you have to wait for the crosswalk to change or the bus to go by or the train to go by. Like people are just like, eh. And they're like, oh, I can sit at this coffee shop real quick or grab a coffee right here. That was the other thing I noticed, was that the streets were lined with shops, and every, like coffee shops, for instance, every like 10 doors, there was another coffee shop. And I'm like, either the rent is insanely low or there's something to the business infrastructure here that allows for so many of the same type of business to exist in the same place and not go out of business.
Part of it is, well, part of it's definitely rent, but also it's just like population density. Like if you have 100 people on your block in Broad Ripple, only those 100 people can go to a coffee shop somewhere. But if you have 1,000 people on a block, they're all going to sort of disperse.
That's a good point. But I guess in seeing that and not thinking about population density, it made me think like we are really underutilizing the space of Indianapolis, specifically downtown. And as somebody who works downtown,
dude, White River State Park
downtown
is like so beautiful. Like literally every time I'm there, I'm like, this place rocks. Broad Ripple is kind of far, frankly. It's not that far, but it's far enough where
I don't think it's far, but
it's far enough to be inconvenient.
Sure.
Like there's other parks closer to me, but like when I'm downtown at White River State Park, I'm like, this is a great space. There should be people having picnics here every day, as long as the weather appeals to you. My wife went to Paris, and she was saying like every single park there was people just like sitting and just like eating bread and cheese. similar
yeah. And all the parks were being like utilized, like the skate parks, the beach parks, like every park that had a thing, like there was somebody doing something on it.
So this goes back to what I first brought up about you having like a full-time job. Is like it's impossible to interact with the world in that way when you're so absorbed in your labor. I feel like
totally.
And don't, in Spain specifically, they take like siestas in the middle of the day.
Yeah,
they just like take work breaks, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't really interact with anyone that was doing that, but I think that makes sense.
I feel like so at my summer camp, we used to have Spanish campers come every year, and just like we would take a rest hour in the middle of the day every day at summer camp, and the Spanish kids loved that. They're like, it's just like they're like, this is just like home.
I feel like if we were to do that here, we would only ever work half days because
Facts.
people would not want to go back to work. If you had a big enough lunch at your white or blue collar job, no, that's not true. At your white collar job, I consider working at Downtown Indy to be kind of white collar. Though I understand white collar work correctly. Is that like highfalutin office work?
It's sort of like the idea of like, this is gonna sound stupid, but like first world, third world country, like it doesn't.
Okay.
It's like an old outdated term.
Yeah.
Blue collar work is just like your plumber versus the guy who answers.
That
emails.
makes sense. Yeah. Anyways, I was saying that because like, if you had a big enough, and I'm guilty of this too, but if I had a big enough lunch, I'm like, man, I ain't doing no work today. But I also work a job. Again, this is my privilege. Like I work a job that I can really tinker and do other things either on the job or do the job after, say, Van goes to bed and Emily is going to bed. Like and maybe that's contributing to my lack of sleep that I need to figure out and correct. But like, I don't know. I feel really privileged to be able to do something that allows me to, like, the work is really like figuring out the technical side of creativity. So color grading, photo composition, video editing, like all of these different things that I really am enjoying learning how to do. And like, I say this because like, I know if I get bogged down at the office, I can get up and go for a walk or go out and take pictures or go be on a podcast that my friend hosts. And I realize, I call it a privilege because I realize 98% of people that work do not have the ability to do something like that. And I think going back to the original question, like, I feel like I do still have opportunities to see and experience community and just the world at large that most people don't have and maybe won't have unless something great happens for them at their place of employment. So,
Yeah. What about Michigan?
in Michigan, it was a little strange because like the first day Canada decided to be on fire and put a bunch of smoke and terrible air quality.
They wanted to ruin
in the
your
world.
vacation. They're like,
I mean,
we're doing this today.
I didn't have an issue with Canada until we went to Michigan. Anyways, no, I love Canada. Shout out to Canada. I don't know. I feel like New Buffalo is kind of a tourist town.
It's called New Buffalo.
Yeah. And
I don't know anything about Michigan.
I don't really know much. It's only 2.5 hours away from here, which is
That's closer than Chicago.
Yeah, it's really nice. Like to not have to drive, because the day before we went, I had to go to Chicago for something, and that was in the North Burbs, and that was like 4 hours away. It was terrible. But I don't know. I feel like and a lot of this was impacted because we had Van with us. Like I was so focused on getting out of the bad air quality and then figuring out a way that we could like get to the beach and just making sure that he was having a good time. And like, we watched way more movies than we were supposed to watch. And like, I don't know. I didn't really feel like I got a sense of Michigan, if that makes sense. I got the sense that there was a bunch of people who don't live in a place and go there and take over. And I could see how locally, if you live there, like that would be not so much fun.
Yeah. What's the most touristy town you've ever been to?
The most touristy town I've ever been to.
Like a place that doesn't feel lived in, but it feels visited.
This place felt like that a lot,
Indianapolis.
to be honest.
Oh, New Buffalo.
New Buffalo,
Not
yeah.
Indianapolis.
Honestly, like I think because it's so fresh in my mind, that's really kind of what I'm thinking about, is that it didn't really feel lived in. Like, especially the area that we were at, it felt like it was really made for either you were really rich and you vacation there, which again means you don't live there, or you were not so rich, but you could afford to stay at a hotel or an Airbnb and bring your whole family. And so it felt like there were just a lot of just random people there. Yeah.
Hard pivot. Would you consider Rensselaer your hometown, a rural town?
Great question. So I think until I went on my identity journey, I wonder how many times I've said that sentence. Until I began my identity journey.
I think you say it on every episode. Maybe twice.
Very well may have. I would love somebody to
Every episode
compile
of your podcast, not mine.
the clips, just do a compilation of me saying something to that effect. So until I started doing all of this stuff and like unpacking my experience, I did consider it to be my hometown.
Oh, sorry. The question was rural town, but I'm interested in your answer also.
Wait, what? Wait, repeat the question.
The question was, is Rensselaer a rural town?
Oh, 100%.
But I also want to hear your answer. I liked where you were going. So
Yeah. No, I thought you asked me if I considered Rensselaer my hometown, comma, a rural town.
Yeah.
That was the original question. Okay, I misheard.
Sorry, that was my
I didn't
fault.
let you finish. Okay, so to answer the ruralness of it, yes. It was, when I was growing up there, it was population 5,000. I think we just crossed that threshold. I think it's maybe 6 to 8 now, but like there are 3 stoplights, I believe, if I'm counting correctly. It's surrounded by fields on all sides. And I don't want to say ideology necessitates like being rural or urban or suburban or whatever, but like if you were to think about a rural Indiana town, I think most people would probably associate like some sort of conservatism with that town.
Sure.
And I would say Rensselaer falls on even the more closer to the far right than it does the center right.
Sure.
So in all regards from my perspective, and it's like a farm town, I think a lot of people would probably consider it a farm town. Yeah, I think it's very rural.
Okay. I apologize for interrupting your original answer, though. I'm really interested in that, too. That was a really interesting thing that you were saying.
Yeah, so I no longer consider if you listen to the John Chi Show, you'll hear my pivot in vocabulary or language I use. I think we actually did an episode where we talked about it, but I no longer consider it my hometown. I consider it the town that I grew up in. Because if we were getting down to the semantics of it, like my hometown is, for all intents and purposes, Seoul, South Korea. Because that's where I was born. And I would consider that to be, for my definition, your hometown. My hometown. Now, there are many questions that I probably will never have answered about the veracity of that. And yeah, the truth of any of that. But I think like as I struggled through like the early days of this journey, I think one of the things that I struggled the most with was realizing that I had been displaced from Korea and brought to a place that I didn't have any say in. And so to give that place the weight of home, and while I have considered it home and did consider it home for many years, thinking that I would grow old and die there in that place, it didn't feel like that didn't feel true. That did not feel authentic to my experience. And so what I realized was Rensselaer really was just the place that I grew up in, and I don't necessarily have a hometown. I don't even know that I would call Seoul my hometown, because I think that while the paper trail may say that, I don't know that I'll ever be able to have a conversation with somebody who knows the whole truth and who would truly give me that truth to verify that this is where you were born, this is where your family is from, this was originally supposed to be your quote unquote home or hometown.
Yeah, that's deeply interesting. Is Miles Morales your favorite Spider-Man?
I love Miles. But I grew up with Peter Parker.
Okay.
So Peter Parker is my favorite Spider-Man. But Miles is definitely 1B.
Okay. The reason I asked is because Miles a lot of his story has to do with like straddling this line of being Puerto Rican
Yeah.
and Black American.
Yeah.
And like having that sort of identity balance within him. Do you like, that's a while, it was sort of a leading question, but now I don't care because
No, ask it anyways.
yeah, it's just sort of like, do you feel that sort of connection where it's like you're balancing, we've sort of talked about this last time you were on, but like balancing the whiteness with like Asianness. Do you imagine, I was also leading into this idea of like alternate realities, like there's different Spider-Men and different alternate realities. Have you ever imagined like the alternate reality Patrick?
Oh, 100%. I think growing up, I definitely thought about other lives that could be lived, not as an Asian person necessarily, but as the white version of me that I desperately wanted to be. But
Stuck in Rensselaer.
Yeah, or not, maybe not stuck in Rensselaer. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think that for the last 6 years, there have been many times, and I would say this is another thing that I've struggled with, is just the what ifs. I would say in the adoptee community, especially in the transracial adoptee community, that there is a lot of discourse around like, how do you navigate, how do you deal with the thought of like what could have been. And I think going back to Korea the second time in 2023, and then going to therapy immediately after because shit was crazy, I think I realized that I was spending a lot of time in those other timelines to the detriment of my actual reality. And I needed to understand that it's okay and maybe sometimes necessary to think about those things, to process those things, but can be really harmful and painful and hard to dig yourself out of dwelling on those what ifs and those alternate realities. And so that's why I feel like I've been able to talk about it a lot more, is because I feel like I'm very secure in what my reality is, and that as much as I believe that the multiverse is a real thing and probably a very fantastical way, I know that I've only got this life to live. And so that's where I gotta put my time and energy.
Yeah.
And it's been really helpful to like have that shift in mindset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Circling back to Rensselaer as a rural community, would you say that as somebody from a rural town who spent what I assume is the first 18 years of your life there, would you say that something I think a lot about is like people in Indianapolis, or not just Indianapolis, but larger cities or larger spaces, have a distinct disrespect for rural towns. Would you say that you've talked about your history in terms of like your friends and like the community spaces or community moments you shared as a young person. Do you feel like what I'm saying is true? And also, like, would you say that these places are devoid of culture, which is like a common talking point?
I feel like I know some people who probably do have that disdain for rural spaces. I think that some of the people that have those opinions have them because politicians from those areas come to the state house and try and dictate what happens in the city. So I think that is an issue. I feel like, so to that end, I do think it is kind of true that people definitely hold those opinions. I don't think it's devoid of culture. I don't think rural areas are devoid of culture. I think the culture, though, is one of whiteness and white supremacy. Even if they would never say those things or admit those things, and
or have a language to convey it.
Exactly. That at the end of the day, and speaking solely from my own experience growing up in a rural space, like, and now having like done a little bit of educating myself on what these things are, like, that is absolutely the way that we navigate. And so part of what I consider to be white supremacy culture is this idea, the narrative of colorblindness. Like, I don't see color. And I think that is one of the most insidious pieces of the narrative, because it gets good people to think that it doesn't matter to them, like race or ethnicity or racism or any like of the harms that come from that. And I knew plenty of great people who spent their whole lives in Rensselaer that also perpetuated this idea that, like, for me, I wasn't really Asian, or I was the whitest Asian that they knew. So essentially erasing that part of me, which led to me trying to erase that part of myself. And so, like, if you were to ask somebody from those places what the culture is, it's going to be like, it might be like cowboy culture or like, you know, like farm culture or whatever. But I think those are just like, those are things you can partake in that I guess you could say have their own culture. But like at the end of the day, I think a lot of those things you can like trace a direct line back to white supremacy and colonization and imperialism and whatever. And it influences both macro and micro life in those places. And that's just speaking for my one town that could wear the facade of being like, it's fine, like everything's fine here. When I was in like maybe kindergarten, maybe pre-K, the KKK came to Rensselaer. So like,
That's crazy.
and had a rally on the courthouse lawn. So like, I would say it's probably not a lot different than like a Martinsville, which is like known for being like the wellspring of white supremacy.
Martinsville celebrated Juneteenth. Did Rensselaer? I don't think so.
Shout out to that lady. I don't know. So when I again started this identity journey, I went to a rally that some of my friends held for like a Black Lives Matter rally in Rensselaer. And I went and spoke. I think you can probably find it on my Reels page. Like for 7 minutes, I went and spoke on my experience growing up in Rensselaer. And I guess similarly to Martinsville, I don't know how much that's been kept up, but like it is possible for those things to break through this like sheet of whiteness in a way that maybe isn't lasting in the way that maybe you or I would want it to be, but I think does have an impact on especially younger folks and the young folks who are people of the global majority who might be growing up in that situation, to see that. And I hate to say like not all white people or not all of this is bad, because obviously you should be able to discern, like end up discerning that. But for a kid, like you need to know that not everybody is terrible. And sometimes it takes just like 1 or 2 or 30 people to show up and say those things. And like we had people driving by with a Confederate flag, yelling shit out the windows, and like it was kind of scary. I'm not gonna lie, but I think at the end of the day, those people. Well, this was before I think the. Actually, no, it wasn't. I think this might have been after the insurrection and all of that, or the failed insurrection and all that shit that happened in 2020. 2021?
2021, because the election was 2020.
Yes. Like where I think violence is a little bit more, encouraged, unfortunately. But like I know the bullies and the people that were the shittiest, I know to be like the least likely to do anything to anybody. They're just doing it because they're probably coming from a place of harm, or it's just all learned behavior, or a combination of the two.
Yeah. Have you ever heard hurt people hurt people?
Exactly that.
Yeah. Hey. Time for canned questions.
All right. The canned questions.
We've been going for a long time, actually.
Have we? What time is it?
It's been 50 minutes.
Damn. This is how it always goes when we get together.
It's true.
Off the pod.
Hey, Third Space Indy, sponsored by City Rising. City Rising is a social impact studio. Most recently, they implemented an eviction data dashboard that looks to highlight and reduce the impact of the over 30,000 evictions, mostly affecting Black and Latino women and their children, Indianapolis faces every year. Learn more at cityrising.org. It's a great dashboard. I've seen it. They sponsored a question, which you have answered before, but I'm still interested. I wonder if you're...
I don't even remember what I said.
We're going to compare, so I don't know. Maybe I'll clip in just like a flashback.
Yeah. Definitely clip it in. I do know what a third space is.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to ask me this question. I did not prepare any third spaces. The world I want to build is a place where people can just be. Like, you're not afraid to go outside for any reason. If you're trans, no one's going to attack you for being trans or exclude you from their sports because you're trans. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Just that. Like, and you're not like, we don't live in self-loathing or shame because of societal influences or telling us that this is the way that you have to feel. That's the world that I want to live in.
What is a third space to you?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember what I said. A third space to me is a place where you can go and just be. That's not your work or your home.
Damn, right on. Let's go.
But
hey, if you want to leave it there, that's cool.
No, I think it's like the only thing that I would add is truly like a third space is a place where you can truly be and are not pressured or forced into being something that you don't want to be. So like we were talking about the Asianapolis dinner, like I would like to consider that and wherever the places that we end up having dinners at to be a third place or space for people, because like my hope is that people feel like they can show up as they are and not as who they think they should be just to fit in. Like, you fit into our puzzle exactly how you are. And if you tried to be somebody else, that piece would not fit. And we would need to figure out what was wrong with the puzzle.
Yeah. When would you say that you first did that for yourself?
Oh.
Or have you still?
So, honestly, I would say there's one moment I think I would attribute to like being the kickoff for like trying to find a third space is in January
6, 2021. when I
was in DC. I was with my people. Cut that out. I host another show. I got into podcasting via a show called The John Shi Show. It's myself and two other Korean adoptees, KJ Relke and Nathan Nowak, and we talk about the experience of being Korean adopted and American and all of the things that entails. It must have been May. In May of 2021, a guy in Atlanta went to 3 different spas, I believe, and murdered 8 people. 7 of them were Asian women.
Yes, I remember this.
And one of the fallouts of that, for me personally, was the realization that nobody I knew, my parents, the friends that I grew up with in Rensselaer, or made it at Purdue and we're still friends with, had once in the last year of like violent rhetoric against Asian people reached out to me and asked me about any of that. And to me, it felt like it felt uncaring. And one of the realizations I had from that was just the realization that, I saw myself as white for a long time. A lot of these people see me as that because I saw myself as that, would basically describe myself as that. But in the moment after that happened and having that initial realization, I was like, I'm mad. And I messaged KJ and Nathan. I was like, I got some shit I got to say. Like, we need to record a podcast. And so we got on the podcast, and basically it's episode 33. Essentially for like 30 minutes, I was just popping off on everybody and why I felt so frustrated and angry, especially in light of specifically targeted attacks. And this was after old people had been punched to death, like set on fire on the subway. Like, this was after all of that. Like, why it felt so painful to me personally to experience what was essentially erasure of my Asian identity, especially as I'd been doing it for like 6 months at that point. Like, are you guys not seeing me? You must not be listening to the podcast. If you're not,
fucking dare you.
You clearly aren't listening to the podcast that I send you the link for every week. And in that moment of being able to sit, and this is me in my room, KJ in his room in St. Louis, and that is not where he was at in Missouri. I cannot remember where he lived. And then Nathan in LA, like, that was the first time I really felt like I found myself in a place where I could just be. And it was very much motivated by emotion, but like, I felt like I could fully and truly express myself in a way that I had never been able to do before. And it sucks that it came from a place of anger, but like, that was the first time I think I really felt like I was in a space where I could just be, and without judgment, without like being forced to try and feel or be something different. Like, I was just allowed to be that. And this was, and I say that because this is also on the heels of being like active on Clubhouse at the time. Look it up. But having been in Asian American clubs on that app and feeling like I didn't really fit in or belong there because I was adopted. And so, yeah, I would say that was like, that's a really long roundabout way of getting to, that was the first time that I really felt like I had that for me. And since then, I've definitely found different ways, and even not in just Asians, in Asian American spaces, to just be.
Yeah, that's a crazy answer. Thank you. Crazy in a good way. Like, I never would have thought it would be that, you know. It's I appreciate you saying that it's unfortunate that it came from a place of anger, because it should not have
Totally.
to, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've said that a lot in the last 6 years. It's just like, and especially from this adoption situation, sphere, community, culture, is that a lot of people don't start having these conversations, don't start like doing introspection or looking into like the bigger picture of adoption or their lived experience as an adoptee until like something major happens. But in my experience and the conversations that I've had, more than likely was like something negative. And like, and I don't want to say, and I don't want to say that to seem like everybody experiences a negative thing that causes them to go on this journey. A lot of people, it's like parenthood, maybe a health thing, but like, I just feel like it should never take a traumatic situation for a person to then be like, oh, I can now be myself. Or I can just be, or like, oh, this is going to send me on my path. And I don't know, because then it's like, it's always tainted by, and maybe not tainted, but it's always influenced or impacted by this one, or maybe multiple, like negative or traumatic things, like in like starting points. And I feel like, so for adoptees specifically, I just made a post about this because I saw somebody else post about it, but like they said, there is no adoption without trauma. And I feel like, I don't know when I talked about this, but I just talked about this recently. Somebody asked me what it was like I told somebody, or I told them that my goal in life is to strive to be whole, the most whole version of me that I can be, because I know that because of adoption, I will never be whole. And I feel like that post about like there is no adoption without trauma is just like really a stark reminder that familial separation is one of the most traumatic things a person can experience. And all adoptees in one way, shape, or form have experienced that at their outset of life. Or most adoptees, not all, but most adoptees. And the same goes for kids in foster care, for fosters. The same goes for all families currently being impacted by ICE in this mass deportation situation that we've got going on. Like, to experience familial separation is, especially forced, is to experience trauma, and that trauma, that something like that, especially manufactured, should never be the reason that your life is what it is or goes the way that it goes. And I think that's real fucked up. And yeah, I'm gonna stop talking because
No, that was great answer. Are you familiar with the concept of like golden handcuffs?
No.
So the idea of like golden handcuffs is like you're stuck in a situation, but only because it's so nice.
Oh, interesting.
So when I was in Arkansas, this was the job I got laid off from, and after I moved here, but a really nice remote job, paid pretty well, like had a lot of flexibility in my work schedule. And I would always tell my therapist that I was seeing at the time that like I just like don't feel, I want something more, I want something else. And she was like, until something happens, you probably won't move. Because or talking about like feeling out of shape all the time, like physically out of shape. She's like, until something traumatic happens in your life, you probably won't change, because first of all, change is like kind of painful, but also just you're comfortable in the situation you're in more than you realize. And in a lot of ways, had golden handcuffs on, quote unquote. So moving into 2025 and moving here and then getting laid off is sort of not traumatic necessarily. I was actually kind of happy to be laid off, but having that dramatic life shift to force me to do what I'm doing now in a lot of ways, I think is really interesting. And the same concept of a lot of Americans are in these sort of golden handcuffs, quote unquote, of we live such comfortable lives, even though in the periphery all these horrific things are happening. They don't affect you directly. No trauma has happened to you directly. No dramatic life shifts has happened to you directly. You're stuck in those golden handcuffs and you can't break out.
Yep. I think that's a great metaphor I had not heard before, but very accurate to my life, I think, especially those first 30 years. Like, I've lived a life of privilege and definitely of comfort, and that comfort like surrounded all of the internal like suffering that I was experiencing. And that coupled with the people in my life being like, we just get over it, or like that was a joke, or like you're too sensitive, like that, like those two things in combination with like the suppression of any and all like negative feelings that I had at all times about myself, about my situation, whatever, definitely positioned me to like just put myself in situations where I was comfortable. And here's the funny thing, I probably would have said even back in my college days or early adulthood that you gotta be uncomfortable to like grow and do all of these things. But like the truth of the matter is, I was only ever seeking spaces that I knew all the people and felt comfortable around, and that I was still performing for, to make sure that they didn't ever leave. Like, because I was terrified of rejection, and I still am to an extent. But like, I remember at Purdue, I've told many stories about like rejecting Asian culture and being rejected by Asian culture and community and people while at Purdue. But like, I remember one day walking down the street from class, and like I was like singing or rapping a song or something, and I see my friends and they were like, you need to stop doing that. And so I stopped doing it, and then I was like, oh, I'm so happy that I have this group of people to be in, like, and I don't need anything else. But the truth was, I needed so much more. I needed to actually separate myself from that group if I was going to start finding myself.
Bro, you could have been Pat the Prodigy.
Refused to do that. Oh, I rapped for a long time. People keep asking me about this now, so just go on SoundCloud
It's
and
out there.
look me up.
I've seen it.
It is out there. Just go on SoundCloud and look it up.
You could have been successful if you had supportive friends.
But that's the thing. So I went out to I like, again, talking about living a life of privilege. Like, I did do things that most people would probably be like, that's uncomfortable. But because I had privilege, I just did it. And so I went to San Diego because I was like, I'm going to pursue music for real.
I did not know that. That's
And-
awesome.
And I recorded at one studio, and that's all I really did. I did like 2 open mics, and that was it, because I was, as my natural state of introversion, I was too afraid to put myself out there in that way. And at the core of it was that I was really, like, my identity was really destabilized at that time. Like, I had no idea who I was. I did not know what I was wanted to do, didn't know what I was supposed to do or why I was even here. But I wasn't saying that to anybody. If anything, I was saying I'm just fine and I'm living a great life. And on the outside, it probably did look like that, but it was very much the opposite. And so I came back. I tell a lot of people this. I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but I tell a lot of people that I came back from San Diego because my grandma got sick, and my grandma and I were really, 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 really close. We talked about that last time, but that's why I came back. That's why I tell people I came back from San Diego. But the other main reason for coming back from San Diego is because I was like, I'm not really gonna pursue music this way, and like it's uncomfortable for me to try and do this, so I need to go back to where the place that I know, and that's why I did that.
Yeah,
because I thought I would stay in San Diego for a long time. My buddy who still lives out there is still out there. He's like some like celebrity bartender now, so like he's living a very cool life and doing like the thing that he's supposed to be doing, and like doing very much him. But like I did not know who I was at that point, and that guided and influenced almost all of my decisions until I was 32.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think about this is my mom always gets self-conscious when I mention her on the podcast, but I always think about being younger and like being so into video games and just being, and then like 2010, 11, 12, like YouTube starts to crop up a little bit, and then creators start to be a thing, like watching old Modern Warfare 2 like clip compilations, that type of thing, and being like so into that and being like I could do that, and then your parents being like you'll never make a career out of that, and now being in 2026 where like so many people have made a career out of that. I just think about like, or like, I didn't play Counter-Strike a ton when I was younger, but I think that if I had put a ton of time into Counter-Strike, I legit could have like been successful in that sphere.
Sure.
But there was no like, and I honestly believe it's probably a legitimate thought to have had at that time by my parents to be like, that's not a reasonable thing, but also I had the vision.
Well, so it's funny you say that, because so now that I have many more, or no, now that I have any Asian friends and have been lucky enough to connect with folks whose families have immigrated here and stuff, you learn about like the Asian parent and we want you to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, because that is what's successful and will make you money. If you do creative stuff, don't do that, because that's not where the money is. And I know a lot of that is out of protection, out of like it's love, but has also like stifled a lot of people from pursuing their dream, chasing their passion. But like when people are talking about that, I'm like, yeah, I didn't have that. My parents were literally like, you need to go to college because that's just what you do. And then when I was like, I'm going to drop out of college, they're like, okay. And then like, they were just like, just do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want that you put your mind to. Just be happy. And like, I literally had the most supportive parents in that way, in a way that I think also, and I hate to say this because it's probably not true, but like in a way when I think about it, that also like that was limiting to me, because it was like,
almost.
Yeah, there was like, there's anything that you want to do, you can do it. And it's like when you're somewhere where there's too many choices or options. And it felt like I was so overstimulated in the idea of like pursuing something, music, including music, that like I just almost didn't do anything. And for a long time, like the only thing I wanted to do was smoke weed, drink, and that's it. Like, and I could do that. And that was not a great life that I was living, even though at the time I probably would have said I was having a great time. So
That's interesting.
That's no knock on my parents, because they really have supported me through everything, including this, guesting on Third Space Indy. But that's like, I don't know. It's just like, when I think about it, I'm like, I do think that there was some limiting aspect to that support in that way that didn't push me to have to like struggle. And I don't know. It's not that you have to go through the struggle, but like, and like I did work from the moment I turned 14. Like my parents told me, if you ever want to do anything with your friends, you need to pay for it yourself.
Good God, that was so loud.
And so I've literally worked at all times. And when I wasn't working, I was actively looking for work, even when I didn't maybe necessarily quote unquote need to do that.
Yeah. But on the topic of parents, my mom probably doesn't remember this. She probably doesn't remember these two things, which is one, she would always say, Michael, no drugs, no alcohol, and no babies. Other than that, I don't care what you do. That was always the rule set, and I adhered to that strictly because I knew it came with a lot of freedom, and it sure did. The follow-up to that is one time I had a party at at her house. It was like mostly summer camp people, and I was over 21, so there was drinking. But someone left like a bag of weed at my mom's house in the basement, and she found it, and she texted me and she goes, hey honey, found a bag of drugs. I know it's not yours, because if it was yours, I wouldn't have found it. And I was like, that's so funny.
Okay.
It was not mine. I was not doing drugs at any point. But I just like I tell people that story. They're like, what? So she she goes, can you get this back to your friend?
That's hilarious.
That was like a really odd experience that I don't think happens to like anybody.
Sure. Well, that was kind of her to be like, if you did the drugs, which I told you to never do, then I would have never found it.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
I didn't do it, but it was like, they were not mine, and she was correct about that. So
that's cool.
I think Do
you have a curfew?
No strict curfew, and most of the time, especially because I attribute so much of my young childhood success to summer camp, because a lot of that one responsibility of like, when there's an expectation, you show up, you always do it. But also, if you aren't able to do so, you say something. So, Mom, I can't show up. I won't be home by midnight. I'm going to be late, or I'm going to stay with it. Most of the time, I just wanted to go home and play World of Warcraft anyways. But there was no like strict curfew. I would go out to like movies and stuff. I was like such a loser as a kid, but like in like a cool way. I don't know.
Yeah. No, you were just like doing the stuff that kids do now.
Yeah.
But like back then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I have two last questions. You know this, but every episode I ask a question from the previous guest.
I don't remember what the question was.
The previous guest is Mike Marbach.
Crossroads Comedy.
Crossroads Comedy Theater. When are you taking an improv class?
I haven't even got on the website
yet. What is something you have seen another city do well that you think Indy should do?
Oh, shit.
Should adopt?
Well, I guess just taking it back to Barcelona, like the commitment to pedestrian and public transportation. Like, obviously a conversation you've had many times on this podcast, but I'm going to say it now because I've seen it with my own eyes just recently. Like protected bike lanes everywhere, huge pedestrian walking paths that did not obstruct driving traffic everywhere. And people were utilizing them, even with unhoused folks on those streets. Like there was not an empty space during wake hours, I guess.
Was the World Cup going on when you were there? Or was it just before? It was before.
Just right before, I believe. Yeah. I don't know. They did have national team kits out, so I think it might have just started.
Well, I'm just wondering because I was thinking about, or I have been thinking about, how they had the one showing downtown when USA lost
Oh yeah.
at the Circle, and just how dope that like there being so many people in the Circle enjoying that space together. They're on the smallest TV. It's like the most like
Bro,
childhood.
don't even get me started on the size of that TV. That's the very first thing I said when I got there.
They
I was
couldn't
like, "Why
project
is this
it
so
on
small?"
the Salesforce Tower. Or
Don't even get me started on the size of that TV. I might get fired.
So I just think that like when I look at moments like that, it's like, what are we doing? Like there should just be
Totally.
a TV downtown all the time. I don't know. It's like Times Square or something.
100%. So it's funny that you say that. Actually, I don't know if I should say this. I'm going to say it anyways. We talked about like what it would look like, particularly on Georgia Street, which is currently under construction, but a public space that we manage, for something like that to exist. And we have had numerous conversations about what it would look like to make the Circle fully pedestrian or pedestrian and bike friendly.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, this is going to sound like very cliche and obvious, but it's capitalism that keeps us from being able to do these things.
Yeah, I'll say it. It's the Columbia Club mostly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can say it. But it's just like, but even like, yeah, it is. And it's just like, it's detrimental. And it could be so easily resolved if we just spent 1 hour talking about alternate solutions for where valet and or parking could happen. But
Literally.
people won't even come to the table to have that kind of conversation because it inconveniences them, and then it inconveniences the people that go into the Columbia Club or any of the other businesses that want to have that parking availability and whatnot. And that's, so to go back to like this idea of why some downtown residents or Indianapolis people might not really enjoy rural people, it's because the few rural people who find themselves in positions of power to influence decision making at a city and statewide level come here and do those things and make it more difficult for us to make it a livable, walkable, lovable city.
Yeah.
And it is those things, but like we could go so much further. And this actually goes back to a conversation I had with Brady Eulis, where she mentioned that X amount of years ago there was a decision made that downtown Indy needed to be a blank slate. So that way when the Super Bowl or any major event, Taylor Swift comes into town, we can become that thing for those people. It's not about the residents or people that live here. It's solely about how can we maximize the downtown area to best benefit the outside entity coming in. And I thought, I'd never heard that before. I thought that was really shocking and also not surprising. And I think it is indicative of why you see so many vacancies, you see so little public art, why we don't do pedestrian or bike friendly stuff more across the city, why Circle Center Mall is closed. Like that might not be the specific reason for all those things, but it sits at the root of the decision making process for stuff that happens downtown.
Yeah.
So like until we change that mindset about how we are going about investing in the culture, and by culture I mean the people and communities that have lived here forever, we're going to continue to struggle to do whatever it is we want to do.
Yeah. Totally agree. There's technically three, but Georgia Street is kind of an extension of this. I think we could pedestrianize the entire Circle, part of Georgia Street, especially around the State House, and then just like all of Mass Ave could all be just like crazy pedestrian stuff, and it would have so little effect on traffic flow. Genuinely.
Yeah, or we could just make it legal for rails to be built.
That's a statewide issue.
And I mean, but it would be like, so somebody actually told me the other day that they were like, I don't remember who I was talking to, but they were talking about like, there is no good way to get from the airport to anywhere. because you can only go by car, really, or maybe shuttle. But
and
like,
the blue line soon. Well, you can technically take the bus now,
but even that, it's just like it's really inconvenient. And we have a world-class airport by many magazine standards. And I really like our airport, to be honest, as a person who's
I
had
like
the
walking
privilege
through.
to
It's
travel.
like one of the most pleasant airports to walk through.
Yeah.
Like the part before security, like the big open.
Oh, yeah.
Is like great.
Yeah. But we have this, and then we just go, we step on our own feet and get in our own way when it comes to like, let's make it also good around and out and to and fro. Like we drivers just like, no, we don't want to do that. We'll make it as hard as possible to get to there and from there. But when you're there, it's great.
Yeah. I will say like a city that is good for its residents will be good for people who visit also.
That's what
Guaranteed.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
dude.
But that goes back to like people at the State House not being. If you look at the legislation about light rail, it specifically targets Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like cities above this certain size. It's like, okay.
Was that Will Hazen?
William
William
Hazen, yeah.
William Hazen. Did he talk about that when he was talking about bus stuff?
I don't
Or was
think
that
so.
Sampson
This
maybe
is
that
just
I
a
saw talking about
very
that?
regular thing that's brought up.
Yeah. Stupid.
One last question, Patrick Armstrong. Actually, I guess technically two, but what is there anything else on your heart, on your mind you would like to speak on in this moment?
I feel like I've probably talked way too much. Sorry for your
That's
editing
okay.
of this episode.
No, I think I'm probably going to do very minimal editing.
Nice.
Great.
No, I'm
Nothing
good.
else?
I don't think so.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Patrick Armstrong, what question would you like to ask the next Third Space Indy guest?
I would like to ask them if you could change one downtown area into a park, where would it be?
I'm going to answer this. The parking lot at the State House.
Oh, okay.
Like that parking lot is so ugly. It's in one of the most beautiful parts of the city.
Is this the one off like Ohio? Like before, like you're going to the Ohio, like the canal?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
And like it's empty most of the time because those people don't work, frankly.
Very true.
So like just get rid of it. I don't know.
Very true. Yeah, I think that's my question. I think it took me a really long time to think of a question last time I was on here.
Downtown or there's the
Well,
clip
I said downtown. It could be anywhere in Indy. I guess downtown. I'm asking downtown because I'm also going to take that information to work and be like, we need to figure out how to transform this place.
I think downtown could use a nice park with trees beyond.
Totally.
Like, the War Memorial is fine, but like I feel like that's an obstruction. I want like just like open space for people to hang.
Yeah, and we need more shade.
Oh, for real though.
So
we got the heat dome.
The last thing that I'll say is that in Seoul, and maybe in other parts of Asia, but in Seoul specifically, because I've been there, they have in certain areas of the city, every like corner on the street, these gigantic umbrellas that are like 10 foot wide or whatever, 20 feet wide. I don't know, but it's amazing because when I was in there in July and it was fucking hot, like any reprieve from the sun was welcome. And those umbrellas, lifesaver.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we could use shit like that here.
Korea's like pretty close to the equator, right? Or is it? Maybe I'm making it up.
I don't know. I'm looking at the map in my brain right now, and I'm realizing that those were created by colonialists and settlers, so they're probably not very accurate.
I'll insert my voice here. I'll tell you if it's near the equator.
The American education system. I always think South Korea is more south than it is because I know it's attached to China, but it's actually attached to the northernmost part of China. It's about on the same latitude as the island of Japan and pretty much Los Angeles, California. So not exactly close to the equator, but certainly not in a horribly cold part either.
Okay.
Patrick, for anyone who wants to find you, where can they find you on the internet or in real life? I don't know.
You can find me in real life, pittering around downtown.
Smile at the camera.
I haven't looked at the camera very much this episode.
I'm talking about your camera that you're taking photos.
Oh yeah, I do take photos around the city. So if I see you, you don't have to smile. I would rather capture you in a candid moment. You can find me online at Patrick in the World on Threads and Instagram. You can go to SoundCloud and search Patrick Armstrong and or Patrick in the World and find the music that I did. That's almost 10 years ago now when I released my last song.
Time to re-up.
What?
Time to make a new one. When's the
I
drop?
thought about it.
4200 Corey. Pat the
No,
Prodigy.
I don't, not on that level, I don't think. Actually, if I'm being honest, I do think that I could hop on anybody's track and to give a serviceable, if not very good verse. Anyways, you can also follow any of my podcasts on all of these places. One of them is called The John Cheese Show. On Instagram, it's at John Cheese Show. You know, JANCHISHOW. You can go to johncheeseshow.com to check out all of our past episodes and go anywhere on your podcast player, any podcast player, I think, and find it. Listen to Conversation Piece. That's at Conversation Piece Pod, PIECE. And I think I still have a website for that. I don't know. And I am actually getting ready to start releasing episodes under the Conversation Piece branding more frequently that are not the live show. And I'm really excited because actually as of today on Friday, I'm recording 2 episodes for that. Back to back out of Lillibon in Fountain Square.
Are you always
Fletcher
recording
Place.
it there?
I think I'm going to for right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so check out my stuff, please, on YouTube especially.
Please subscribe on YouTube. I would like to monetize. Hey, you can find me by going to Third Space Indy on Instagram or by going to thirdspaceindy.com where I leave a blog and show notes. Thank you so much to City Rising for sponsoring the podcast. And thank you, as always, to the local artist Jennasen for your song Scared Rabbit, which I used as the intro music. Thank you so much for watching or listening.
I do have one question for you.
The last second question.
Yeah. Is Ray Oldenburg still alive?
No.
Oh, okay.
He has a replacement. Her name is, I think it's, I've emailed her. I say replacement. His old right-hand woman, it's a lady who's from Indiana originally, and I've emailed her. And
Okay.
We're in contact loosely. No, it's not like regular contact, but I've contacted this person.
Nice. I was going to ask if he were still alive, what do you think he would say about you using his quote on the intro of every one of your
I
shows?
think he'd like it.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think so too. I
Yeah.
think he'd be flattered, maybe, but we don't know. We can't ask him. He's not here.
I think people appreciate when they're given credit.
100%.
Yeah.
Ask any creative on Instagram or any artist that has had their work stolen by AI.
100%.
All
All right.
I'm done.
Thanks for watching or listening wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Hey, if you listen to the end, you get a last clip. Anna Darling, I hope you listen to the end. Call out.
Shout out.
Bye.
Bye.
Scared rabbit, is the coast clear? Go grab it, you're gonna starve here. On your bed of death with one regret, what you never said.